Log Horizon, Volume 1, Chapter 2, Small Assassin, Part 1. 4 days later. It had been 4 days since they drifted ridiculously into an alternate world. After bidding farewell to Maryelle, Shiroe and Naotsugu traveled all over Akiba, scavenging for information. Naturally, there were a few facts discovered every day. The simplest thing that they understood was that they would still get hungry. Shiroe already noticed something was wrong when they said their goodbyes with Maryelle. But their feelings of nervousness and fear over their current situation overwhelmed the sensation, so they kept searching for information until their legs were numb. Night fell without Shiroe and Naotsugu recognizing the feeling of hunger. But they lost to hunger in the end, and headed to the market to purchase food just before dawn. Shiroe and Naotsugu brought their food to the abandoned building where they met earlier to enjoy their unhealthy supper and breakfast. It concluded in a painful experience. Shiroe bought roasted chicken with orange and tomato sauce, chocolate cake, and green tea. Naotsugu purchased seafood pizza, mashed potato with bacon, Caesar salad, and orange juice. It sounded extravagant, but the both of them were level 90 players, wealthy enough to buy as many of these player-crafted meals in the market as they wished. It looked like a bright, fresh, luxurious, and sumptuous meal, but the food all tasted the same. In Naotsugu's unassuming words, they tasted like soggy crackers without any salty flavor. Shiroe had no choice but to agree with this review. The beverages had different colors, but they all tasted like tap water. It wasn't so disgusting that you would spit it out, and it didn't seem poisonous. You felt full after eating, so it was indeed food. But it was an experience Shiroe and Naotsugu could do without. They were not sure how to react, since it was not disgusting enough to make you curse or swear. You would sulk as you ate more of it, as if the hope in your heart was starting to fade away. It was disgusting in a pathetic way. They confirmed something else about the variety of food they bought. All the food they ate was crafted by players, with the NPCs selling it on their behalf. Apart from the main classes, Elder Tales also had countless subclasses. The food was made using the cooking ability of a chef, one of the subclasses. Subclasses were independent of main classes, so in Elder Tales, there could be samurai chefs or sorcerer chefs. These chefs could create food Shiroe and Naotsugu ate according to their chef level. But cooking in Elder Tales was very simple. Stand beside a cooking facility, choose the ingredients from the game menu, and input the use command. The food ingredients could be gathered from different areas. You could get meat from monsters sometimes, or pick it up from dungeons. There were also seeds you could plant in fields. Basic ingredients were sold by NPCs, and could be purchased from the players in the market as well. Anyways, you could choose from the list of food you wish to create by using the use command on the ingredients. After selecting your desired dish, you needed to wait 10 seconds before the ingredients vanished, and were replaced by the finished product. Did the problem lie with the simplified process? This was the deduction Shiroe and Naotsugu made. They had also confirmed yesterday that the ingredients themselves had taste. Oranges and apples were tender and juicy. Freshly caught fish smelled like usual. The salt and sugar purchased from NPCs tasted salty and sweet respectively. But the products made using these materials all tasted like tasteless, soggy crackers. This process wasn't forced in this game world, and they couldn't do anything to change that. They could not tamper with the ingredients either. If they tried to boil them, the ingredients turned into a weird paste. With no other choice, Shiroe and Naotsugu bought salt along with their food, sprinkling the food with salt as they ate. It was still a pitiful meal, but at least it was better than chewing wax. Since you needed to eat, you would need to use the bathroom, which was also a necessary action. And that was confirmed rather quickly. Since they were guys, Shiroe and Naotsugu had no problems as long as they were fine with doing it outdoors. But they did wish there was toilet paper. Shiroe heard Naotsugu mumble, girls must have it hard, but he pretended not to hear it. There were many things that couldn't be helped no matter how hard Shiroe thought. They also found out they could not do without sleep. Shiroe had great stamina, unlike in the real world. His level 90 body had high physical stats, even as a magic attack class, and these numbers were reflected on his body. But fatigue and sleepiness were two different things, and Shiroe and Naotsugu grew drowsy after moving for a period of time. Shiroe and Naotsugu checked in once they reached the hotel, renting a zone to use as their residence. They hadn't used this function when Elder Tales was just a game, since they could just find any random alley in Akiba if they wanted to log off. They would disappear from the game world if they weren't playing. but this obvious choice for players was no longer applicable to them. Since they were still in the game when they were sleeping, they would need a physical place to rest, and they didn't return to their original world when they woke up. Speaking of returning to their original world, they had confirmed one other thing. You could revive if you died in this Elder Tales world. The players who died in this world respawned in the cathedral after some time. If the game mechanics still applied, players would lose part of their experience and gold when they died, but Shiroe and Naotsugu hadn't experienced this yet, so they couldn't tell for sure. Since they could revive after dying, that meant they wouldn't disappear if they died in this game world. But this also meant that their hope of going back to their world through death was gone. Eating and dying. From these two essential concepts of survival, they could conclude that this was a contradictory and twisted world. At a glance, this world seemed to be a faithful replication of Elder Tales. Shiroe and Naotsugu, who had retained their abilities and wealth from the game, were living in this game world where monsters roamed freely. But a game is a game, and couldn't be replicated in an alternate world. Compared to the real world that obeyed the laws without contradiction, Shiroe felt that this world was imperfect and full of loopholes. The best example of this was food. Grilled fish made from fish and salt didn't taste like fish or salt. Just something that looked like grilled fish but tasted like soggy crackers. But if you sprinkled salt on grilled fish, it actually had the taste of salt. Sprinkling salt made food salty, but food crafted with salt didn't have that taste. Shiroe and Naotsugu tried grilling fresh fish with a heat source, such as a campfire. But no matter what they did, it didn't become the grilled fish they were familiar with, and instead turned into a mysterious black paste. It was the same with sleep and using the bathroom. These functions were unnecessary for games. But in this Elder Tales world that had become reality, they could get drowsy and really need to sleep. There was something wrong with this world, no matter how you thought about it. Since it was a world, there should have been a set of laws. But whether it operated like Elder Tales or followed some strange physics associated with alternate worlds, they were unable to tell. It might be a bizarre combination of both, turning this world into a chaotic mystery. A lot of things were confirmed by the fourth day. On the second day in the alternate world, Shiroe and Naotsugu decided to go into the field zones in Akiba. They headed to the adjacent zone that was just beside the area outside the city gate, the Archive Tower Forest. Since it was close to the starter city of Akiba, Archive Tower Forest had a low difficulty. The zones surrounding all 5 major cities were usually suitable for low-level players to train. High-level monsters lurked in zones like the deep hills that were far away from the city zone. This was common knowledge in Elder Tales. This was a typical ruins field zone with monsters about level 20 roaming around. Similar to the abandoned buildings in Akiba, they were covered in vines and parasitic plants. As its name suggested, Archive Tower Forest was a zone with many bookshops, libraries, and a research lab that was connected to several dungeon zones. While the enemies were weak, their drop items included secret-level skill scrolls, so it was popular among novice adventurers. The enemy monsters were only about level 20. Shiroe and Naotsugu were level 90 players, with good equipment and vast experience, so they wouldn't gain any experience points no matter how many such monsters they defeated, because of the difference in levels. They only came to the novice zone to experience battle in Elder Tales in a relatively safe environment. The battle was not proceeding as they expected. It wasn't because the enemies were strong. The goblins and grey wolves fell with a scratch from Naotsugu's sword. Even Shiroe, who was an enchanter with the weakest attack in the game, could kill them with one shot. That was the extent of their level difference. But being able to defeat enemies didn't mean you'd have an easy time fighting them. When Shiroe saw the grey wolves and goblins attacking with rusty, blood-splattered axes for the first time, he was terrified, and he almost collapsed from his feet giving out. His breathing rate was 10 times faster than normal. Even though he took in lots of air, he felt suffocated, which narrowed his field of vision. The enemy attacks would not harm him. If Shiroe hadn't convinced himself that this was the case, he probably would have fled by now. And he confirmed this after some time. The level 90 Shiroe had at least 8,000 HP, while Naotsugu, who used the class with the strongest defense, Guardian, had over 13,000 HP. The goblins' attack could only deal single-digit damage. Even if they howled fiercely and swung their axes with all their might, their blows felt painless, like the punches of a grade schooler. Shiroe and Naotsugu cooled down after ascertaining this fact. They didn't get hurt after regaining their composure, but the fighting remained difficult. The laws of physics of the real world they took for granted were twisted together weirdly with the rules of Elder Tales. They could see these effects everywhere they looked. When fighting in a party in Elder Tales, like Shiroe and Naotsugu, you took note of your allies' HP through the status screen and chose the appropriate tactics and coordinated with each other almost subconsciously. Would other enemies approach you while you were fighting enemies in front of you? Would the enemy link up with more monsters or call for reinforcements? Which enemy was the priority target? Which foe could you keep at bay for now and take out later? Various details like these were important elements that could affect the battle. But it was hard to even confirm each other's HP in this environment. The HP values would be displayed if they focused on their forehead, but fighting in a dangerous place with debris all over while keeping track of these numbers in their mind was next to impossible. Shiroe could still spare some time to observe the battlefield as a mage, but the guardian Naotsugu had to engage the enemy on the front lines to protect his allies and would lose the ability to grasp his surroundings, fighting almost blindly. The enemies were weak, so there was no need to be too concerned about HP, but this wouldn't do when fighting foes of the same level. The food tasted like soggy crackers, even though its appearance was that of a meat bun. Shiroe and Naotsugu reviewed the details of the battle while eating the tasteless food they'd grown tired of. The two of them had no martial arts background. For amateurs like them, they had no idea how to handle the emotions and fear during fights, and were seriously doubtful that they could simply get used to them through live battles. But in the back of their minds, they knew they would face major problems later on if they were frightened by level 20 minions. Elder Tales was a fantasy adventure game that derived most of its entertainment from battling monsters. If this was a world affected by Elder Tales, or was the world of Elder Tales itself, getting used to battles was a necessity to survive here. Fortunately, their bodies were stronger than they expected. Their high levels kept them from getting tired, and they could regain their vigor after resting a few minutes if they got tired from traveling or battling. Shiroe and Naotsugu spent most of their days out in the field, and their evenings in the pub or visiting people they knew. They conversed with players in the same boat as them, and gathered any news. Akiba appeared peaceful on the surface during these 4 days. There were no major commotions like Shiroe had feared would happen. Maybe after confirming the abundance of bland food and their ability to respawn, it allowed them to regain the most basic sense of security. But there were still some incidences that couldn't be ignored. First, the volume of market goods on sale had dropped. Most players had come to the same conclusion as Shiroe and withdrawn their merchandise. The goods left for sale on the market belonged to the players who weren't logged in, but even those sold out over time. There were rumors of major guilds cutting off supplies, and the items that were sold out were starting to gain popularity. There were many players with production subclasses, but they had stopped working in reaction to the situation. Another effect was the recruitment campaigns of the guilds, or the players without guilds looking for one. Another effect was the recruitment campaigns of the guilds, or the players without guilds looking for one. Humans were creatures that found solace in numbers. Many carefree players without a guild decided to join one after experiencing this event. You could tell which players joined which guild by checking their status through the status screen, but it was hard to find out all this information when you were inside the game, so Shiroe could only estimate based on the ratio of players he saw, but he did feel a sharp drop in solo players. Shiroe and Naotsugu, who were both level 90, received many invitations just walking the streets, but the two of them declined all offers. Ignoring Shiroe, Naotsugu had no reason to reject them. When Shiroe queried him, Naotsugu replied with a smile, "Getting to know companions is the result, not the reason. You need to move forward fearlessly and make friends through the process of battles." The debauchery tea party had not been a guild. It was just a coalition of players. For the two of them with a history in such a group, guilds were just an unimportant title. And the two of them didn't think joining a guild provided any safety when facing such a critical and confusing incident. But most people thought different from Shiroe and Naotsugu, and saw guilds as something they could depend on. The twin Shiroe was accompanying the day of the incident seemed to have joined a guild as well. He only saw them on the streets in passing, but they seemed to be safe, allowing Shiroe to breathe a sigh of relief. Players without a guild wanted to join one for the feeling of security. Lots of guilds started recruiting campaigns in response to such demands. Some guilds canvassed for players without a guild, but there were other examples of several small guilds merging, or famous major guilds headhunting specific players. Shiroe didn't understand why the guilds wanted to expand until Maryelle explained it. It had something to do with the comfort of staying in Akiba. After the incident, some players thought they had barged into an alternate world, which Shiroe felt was reasonable. But the players felt much more frustrated over this ridiculous state of affairs than Shiroe had expected. These emotions gathered together in the form of a guild and formed a consensus of, if you are not with us, you are against us. They could trust their guildmates, but not others. This was the natural defensive reaction when living in such a hostile environment. But this atmosphere was too strong, making friction between guilds obvious. They wouldn't be attacked since Akiba was a non-combat zone. If there were any attempts to fight, steal, or kidnap anyone, the guards would instantly appear to arrest the player in violation. But harsh words and harassment would not be judged as combat actions. There were many ways to get around the restriction of combat actions to harass others, even more so for players trapped in this world. Small guilds were often the victims of such harassment. Maryelle tried to conceal her troubled face with a smile when talking about this. Shiroe had found out some important information regarding the zones as he was discussing the topic with Maryelle. He casually opened the status screen and noticed an unfamiliar tab below the tab related to guilds. It was unfamiliar, but he had seen it before. This tab displayed the information of the zone you are in, detailing Japanese server, Akiba, city area, no monsters, battle restricted zone, entry restriction, none, exit restriction, none. Shiroe, Maryelle, and Naotsugu were talking in a small alley. This provided a summary of this zone and Akiba, which had no problems. The issue was the next line. This zone is not owned by any person or guild. Sale price is 700 million gold. Monthly maintenance fee is 1.2 million. Purchase? Yes? No? This line was displayed when you were buying small abandoned buildings, hotel rooms, or guild halls like the one the Crescent Moon Alliance was in. But Akiba City was now a tradable asset, even though it required an astronomical amount of money. Naotsugu and Maryelle thought that Shiroe was joking when he pointed this out, but they were dumbstruck when they checked it out themselves. Shiroe was a high-level veteran player and was wealthier than others. He had about 500,000 gold and assets in the bank, so he was certain that 700 million was not something a single player could come up with. But if a major guild pooled all their resources, even though that was probably impossible, it was possible for them to gather this amount of cash. Assuming someone succeeded in buying the streets of Akiba, the buyer would be able to set the entry and exit restrictions here, including any people or guilds the buyer hated. They could be barred from entering this city. The members of the Crescent Moon Alliance spread out to investigate under Maryelle's instructions, and they found out this purchase line was available in almost all the zones. In other words, be it a city, field, or dungeon, all the zones were open for sale right now. The exceptions were places that already had an owner. For instance, a zone like the Crescent Moon Alliance's Guild Hall. In this situation, the owner would have another option to turn over their ownership into a land deed item. The 4th day after that incident, the expansion campaign of the major guilds was no longer just a tactic to increase the guild's size in the eyes of Shiroe's group.
To read along with Log Horizon, or to read any other fine light novels, go to Baka-Tsuki.org, Baka-Tsuki.org. If you want to voice a character for audio light novel Log Horizon, contact me at youtubecontact22@yahoo.com. If you want to pay for your services, I can pay some money, just not a lot, and I am willing to negotiate a price. You can also volunteer if you wish. Again, just contact me at the specified email address. I'm also willing to reply to any constructive criticism, so if you have any ideas for audio light novel Log Horizon, please leave them in the comments. If you like audio light novel Log Horizon, please leave a like or a comment, as it really does motivate me to do these.